We are joined now by Arif Hasan. He covers the NFL for wideleft.com. Arif, how are you this morning?
I'm good. How are you?
Good morning to you. Appreciate you being with us. We don't, in the land of college football here, dab smack in Nebraska, we don't get near enough NFL talk. So we always appreciate when you're available. And as a tech guy that likes audio, you have apparently what is one of the best setups going with your little soundproofing.
Oh, so you got like a real studio over there.
Yeah, legit, man. And you had us laughing the last time. We're like, yep, we're riding. We're riding again.
Appreciate it, man. Yeah, no, I love showing it off.
I got to start now. Again, like I said, full disclosure, I am a Steelers fan. So feel free to hurt my feelings. I feel like this is one of those football teams, especially in their division. They still get the yeah, but like ... Is it time to lose that moniker when we talk about the Steelers?
If you'd asked me that 3 weeks ago, I'd say no. I think that, Russell Wilson has done a lot to demonstrate to me that, he's like a genuinely good quarterback this year, that we're not relying on, all of these tricks to make quarterbacks look good for a couple of weeks at a time. Yeah. And I think that, his relationship with like George Pickens and a couple of these other receivers has really been really meaningful in terms of making that offense move, because, Steelers defense, I think that, it's playing a little bit better than I expected this year, but we all kind of expected it to be at least reasonably good. It was really the offense that was a big question mark. And I think that they've done a really good job, kind of regardless of who's at quarterback, making sure that offense can at least function. But with Russell Wilson, especially the last couple of weeks, that offense has done more than just function. It has been really explosive. Obviously, we saw that this last week, but I mean, over the past 4 weeks, I think the only quarterback that's had better numbers anyway than Russell Wilson's Jordan Love. And so this has been a really, I think, astounding turnaround from, a team I didn't have a ton of belief in at the beginning of the season, that a lot of other people didn't have a ton of belief in at the beginning of the season. And, I guess you stop counting on Mike Tomlin, I guess, is the lesson I'm learning.
I'm sitting here and I'm trying to learn some lessons as well. And I'm looking at Kansas City and I go, okay, is this just a team with winning DNA? Are they just the luckiest team in the world? Like, where do you land there, right? Because there's some things that happen there, like, okay, like there's got to be some luck involved there. But on the other side, you're like, okay, this is just a team that wins a lot and knows how to win. Like, how do you measure that when evaluating Kansas City this year?
Yeah, that is really tough. They are a baffling team, in part because they've been so successful recently that you just kind of want to give it to them. But I think it's a little bit of both. I think this is what happens when you get a team that has higher level performance at the end of games than other teams, combined with a team that has a little bit of luck. Like, I think this is what that looks like when a team otherwise is kind of underperforming. You end up with a team like this. In fact, I covered a team back in 2022 that was a lot like this, the Minnesota Vikings. Both had really good end of game performance pretty consistently and had a lot of luck. Ended up winning a lot of close games, ended up making the playoffs. Obviously didn't do as well as in the playoffs as I would expect the Kansas City Chiefs to do. But I think one other thing is that the Chiefs kind of don't start taking stuff seriously until about now. And so it's a little bit tough to really break them down.
Whatever they get ready, that's what you say to yourself. And they have the only player in the NFL that can negate stats.
Right? Yeah, no, absolutely.
It's incredible. It doesn't matter how miserable something looks, or you just wait for him to do something that no one else is going to do.
Yeah, the Patrick Mahomes is the only quarterback. I believe I've got a whole database going all the way back to like 1960. He's the only quarterback with at least 20 games where at some point they've been behind in the fourth quarter, where he has a positive winning percentage. His winning percentage is 54.5% in those games. Only quarterback in NFL history like that. And I think that there has to be some element there that, like you said, kind of goes beyond the traditional statistics, that goes beyond, what we think of when we think about evaluating quarterbacks, and, demonstrates his ability to produce winning situations, right? To find the opportunities in the game, to really produce. And I think that there is something there. I think also it's hard to get to there without being a little bit lucky. I think that, I think it's difficult to crack 50%. if you're not a little bit lucky in those situations. But I think just for the most part, it's difficult to get to the point where you're cracking 50% if you're not at least a much better in those winning situations than you are throughout the rest of the game. I think he takes a lot of time to break down what an opposing defense is doing over the course of the game and really exploits them near the end.
It's mind-boggling how they're third in their own division in point differential, and there is a team within 3 games of them. Like,
That's outstanding.
I just want people to understand that they're third in their own division in point differential, and there isn't a team within 3 games in their division.
And for the record, my worst to first sleeper leads that division in point differential. Like, just for the record.
That's right. You did.
I was like, I think the Chiefs might regress in the regular season a little bit, which, to be fair, they have. They've just won all those games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's a, like I said, it's an insane one to break down. It's really tough to figure out, especially because the defense hasn't been good since Watson went down. Like, I think that there's like a lot of elements at play here that have really made the Chiefs come out of the gate like a lot weaker than we're used to seeing, even for a Chiefs team that, like we mentioned, takes a little bit of time to get online. But, you know, I just think that when you've got somebody like Andy Reid, when you've got somebody like Patrick Mahomes, you know, navigating the path to victory is a little bit easier. And I think that that's kind of the way to think about this, is that, you know, they know kind of what a win is going to look like in terms of the step-by-step process at the end of the game in order to produce that. Now, against the Raiders, I would say they were more lucky than good. Like, I'm not going to just give them wins that were like a product of just their skill. I think that they were pretty lucky there. But I do think that, you know, putting themselves in a situation where they're never, you know, more than a score apart, where they find ways to produce in the fourth quarter and create additional points, that's going to allow luck to put you in a good place, which is better than I think a lot of teams are in, where like once they get a lucky break, it's too late. You know, they haven't done enough to produce in the game. So yeah, no, certainly I think that, you know, the Chargers look absolutely phenomenal. Great pick, by the way. I think that, you know, the Chiefs are probably going to lose another game here or there. But once the playoffs start, I think all bets are off.
Yeah, we're fully, even though I can't stand Ravi most days, we're fully kindred spirits, because my worst to first was the Commanders. Unfortunately, they're in a division with a team that's on a heater with a head coach no one wanted. In your opinion, like, who are, I'll get to the Eagles in a second, but who are the Commanders for you? Boy,
I mean, they're so exciting. They're so exciting. They might be the most exciting team in the NFL right now to watch. I do think that they are a better team than the Eagles. But you know how this conversation we were just having about how sometimes better teams don't win more games. It just happens sometimes. I am still really curious about how sustainable Cliff Kingsbury is as an offensive coordinator, just because we saw what happened in Arizona, you know, in the second half drop off. It looked like that was happening here in Washington. And then, you know, they just have this game where it's like, okay, you know, maybe he's kind of figured out how to be a little bit more successful over the course of the season than he used to be. I don't know, but I do know that they've got Terry, they've got Jaden. You know, it's like a great combination. That defense is performing way better than I had expected it to. You know, they're a team that, you know, it's not like I expect them to make a complete run to the Super Bowl. It's very clear that they've got, you know, some lessons to learn along the way. They're a pretty young team in some pretty crucial areas. And so I think that's going to hurt them in the playoffs. But I think that, you know, if you line them up in a regular season game against the Philadelphia Eagles, have 10 games play out, I think they win like 7 of them. I think they're a really good team.
All right. So I'm in this because I think the Eagles are really good. I would say that I wouldn't kind of die on the hill that they aren't the best team in the NFC. We're probably not going to see eye to eye on that, considering what Commanders. But could I convince you that if they were the 1 seed, it is much more valued playing where they play than if Detroit was the 1 seed playing where they play? Would you look at those 2 teams differently based on where they played?
So if we grant the Eagles the 1 seed, they're more likely to say make the Super Bowl than if we granted the Detroit Lions the 1 seed.
Yes.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. No. I mean, obviously having that home field advantage in the NFC Championship game is huge, and I think that matters a little bit more for the Eagles than for the Lions. Yeah. No. It's huge. It's huge. I do think the Lions are a better team, though. And this is not a knock on the Eagles. I think the Eagles are a really great team. It's just you've asked me about two teams I really respect a lot in comparison. I think that the way the NFC, the one seed is so much more important, I think, in the NFC than the AFC, because I think there aren't any great teams in the NFL right now, but I think there's more good teams, in the NFC. And I think whichever one of those teams grabs that bye, as well as that home field advantage, is going to have a huge advantage over their opponents going forward. And so I think that whoever grabs it is going to be, I'm not going to say a lock or anything like that. They got to play the games, but is going to be in the driver's position. But yeah, the Lions are really good. The Eagles are really good. The Commanders are really good. It's a difficult conference to break down.
We're talking with Arif Hasan, wideleft.com, covering the NFL. Speaking of difficult to break down, do we have any idea if Baltimore's good or not?
I think they're good, but I think that's a fair question. I think
a month ago, I thought they might have been the best team in the NFL.
I did too.
And now I'm like,
I was like, yeah, the Baltimore's the best team in the AFC. That was a month ago.
And then I'm like, I don't know if they're good at all now.
No, they've definitely been disappointing, especially against division rivals, which is part of the AFC North. I think those games tend to be closer than a lot of divisional games that we're used to seeing over the years. But losing to the Steelers a couple weeks ago, obviously losing to the Eagles just now, that's not like wonderful for the resume. But hey, we were just talking up the Chargers to beat the Chargers, right? And I think the Bengals are better than their record, and they beat the Bengals. So it's a situation where you grab a couple of losses and a team that you put on a pedestal is no longer on that pedestal, but they are a good team. But like I said, there are no great teams in the NFL this year. I don't think, like, even though we've got a couple of teams with only one or two losses, I think that a lot of these teams are good. Plus they got a little bit lucky. Like, that's just kind of what happens sometimes. And I think here the Ravens were just not one of those teams that got a little bit lucky. So yeah, I think they're a really great team. That defense is flagging a little bit. They've got a couple of injuries that are going to make them a little bit less of a strong defense than they were at the beginning of the season. And Lamar was playing some truly, truly outstanding football for the first 2 months of the season, and that has dropped off a little bit. And so that's really going to hurt them if that doesn't, move back up, because in the AFC, you're dealing with somebody like a Josh Allen, who's right now like an MVP favorite, who's playing really well. Obviously, again, like we talked about, Patrick Mahomes might just turn it on in the playoffs. So he's got to find that quality that made him an MVP, candidate 3 weeks ago. But, I think they are like a good team. I think it's going to be difficult to play them in the playoffs, but there's a lot of good teams. I don't know.
With that in mind, even if Lamar Jackson does kind of regain his form from earlier in the season, is that enough to make you trust Baltimore in the playoffs? Like, at what point are you just like, oh, this is just who they are after the regular season?
I think that this is a really good opportunity for a team like Baltimore to advance in the playoffs, because again, the Chiefs aren't as good as they usually are. I think that makes them a little bit vulnerable. The Bills obviously are having a really great season, but I think one thing is that I thought Josh Allen, when he was throwing all those picks last year, was better than he is this year when he's not throwing as many picks. Both really outstanding seasons. I don't want to knock either of these seasons for him, but I don't think he's playing as well. And maybe that's because he doesn't have the receiver core he's used to having. Depends. We'll see how much Amari Cooper, features in that offense going forward. But I do think that there are more opportunities here to knock off some AFC stalwarts, right? The Bengals might not even make the playoffs. And so you've got all these quarterbacks that are not playing up to the level that you typically expect to see them play at. And that gives, teams like Baltimore an additional edge when it comes to, throwing off the schneid, making sure that little tiny playoff curse, whatever you want to call it, doesn't really impact them. And I know they've got a really great coach that knows how to win in the playoffs, that knows how to close down games, knows how to coach a team through championships. And so I do think that this is a really good year for Baltimore to, make it to the Super Bowl and show something out of these wonderful regular seasons they've been having.
Can you imagine how good Buffalo could be if they actually understood that how good James Cooks is? How that guy? No, I'm sorry. How does that guy only get 13 carries a game? He's so good and so underappreciated. It's like, all right, well, Ray Davis here. Let's go. We'll throw you some carries. Josh Allen, you running the little like. James Cooks is legit, and he has 13 carries a game. It's incredible.
I think there's two elements at play here. One is that they're so used to Josh just carrying the running game that now that they've got a running back, they kind of don't know what to do with themselves. I think that's a little bit of it. But I think some of it is they don't want to overwork him before you get to the playoffs. I think that they're going to run the ball a little bit more with Cook once they get to the playoffs and lean on him a little bit more, because I think that you're right. His ability to just break these tackles, it goes beyond what his size is, right? A lot of these guys that are breaking tackles have, this really remarkable size speed combination. And James Cook is just a good running back, which is not to say he's not a good athlete, but I think, he has these running back skills that make him really valuable, both in, the running game, breaking these tackles, and in the receiving game. He's a little bit of a better route runner than I'd given him credit for coming out of college. And so I think that we're going to see more the Buffalo lean on James Cook a little bit more in the playoffs. But, while you've got somebody like Ray Davis being as productive as he is, while you've got all of this going on, you might as well kind of give him a little bit of a rest, because you don't want the body to break down before you get to those really crucial games.
So I want to get to speaking of bodies breaking down, my San Francisco 49ers and the NFC West in general. I'm just assuming the 49ers season is over. Like I've resigned to that fact. I think I was resigned to that fact a while ago, but that is a super interesting division with almost no space between the Rams and the Seahawks. And I look at the Rams, I go, I still think that might be the best team in that division. How do you break down the NFC West?
Yeah, really, really, complicated division to figure out. It may just because I saw Arizona take it that close to the Vikings that I might like Arizona a little bit more. I don't know. But the Rams obviously have played some really good football. Hopefully they stay healthy, like they've had some difficulty doing throughout the year. But yeah, I don't know. It's because I think that the quarterback play I've liked the most this year out of this division is Geno Smith, but I can't really trust the rest of Seattle. That defense, when it's good, is really good. When it's bad, is really leaky. That offensive line will continue to be a problem. And that is a little bit of an issue for both the Rams and the Cardinals, too, that offensive line issue. And so I don't know what else can separate a lot of these guys. I think that, again, we were talking about luck. I think that the luckiest team ends up winning this division, because I think a lot of them are really, really close. Man, I think I like the Cardinals the most, just because I like the growth we've seen out of Jonathan Gannon as a head coach. I like how that defense has really adapted to the personnel that they have, which is a huge problem they've had over the past couple of years, really taking advantage of all the personnel that they've had. And their coverage unit in particular has gotten a lot better, because it was a disaster at the beginning of the year. They've really figured out who they have, how to best use those players. Not that it's a great coverage unit right now, not that it's a great pass rush right now, especially with all the injuries they have at edge rusher, but they are manufacturing ways to produce production on the defense, which is kind of all you need, I think, when you get that offense going. I'd like to see them use Marvin Harrison a little bit more, but Kyler Murray's playing at a really high level. Trey McBride is playing at an elite level. I don't know if he's an elite player, but he's playing at an elite level right now. And I think that kind of mismatch is going to give them an advantage when it comes to this divisional race.
All right, let me get you out of here on this one. In the AFC South, who's the best team in your opinion, and how much of it has to do with Kirk Cousins having a 1.3 to 1 touchdowns to interception ratio?
Man, oh geez, I think it might be the Buccaneers, but it's tough. Cousins, I think, is gonna. That's probably his worst game of the season. I don't think he's gonna have another game like that. So I don't want to just evaluate him based off of that Chargers game, but I do think that we've only seen 4 or 5 good games from him. Mind you, they've been outstandingly good games. But I think the fact that, we haven't seen a ton of good games throughout the season from him is an indication that they can't really sustain this. That defense is playing just all right. It's not going to do enough to kind of cover for those mistakes. Not that anything could cover for kind of what happened in that Chargers game, but I think going forward, when you have offensive mistakes, they just don't have the ability to recover from them. The Buccaneers kind of do. I also just think Baker Mayfield, this is not a sentence I thought I would say, but 2024, Baker Mayfield's more consistent than Kirk Cousins. And I think that's going to drive them to a little bit more in terms of victories. So I like Baker Mayfield's ceiling in this offense with what they're doing, even when they've lost Dave Canales and even when they've lost a couple of receivers to injury. I think that he is finding ways to take advantage of, how well Bucky Irving is playing, getting Mike Evans back, figuring out kind of all of those pieces, Kate Otten, figuring out all those pieces together. I think he's doing more to figure that out than Cousins is doing with a much, much better offensive supporting cast. And I think that level of consistency is kind of what's going to drive them to win that division.
That's Arif Hasan, wideleft.com. Arif, we appreciate the time as always. Great
good
stuff. We'll talk again soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
That's Arif Hasan. Make sure you check out his work at wideleft.com.